Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Simone and I'm Community Manager with the Oxford Languages Marketing Team, and I'll be your host today. I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues Charlotte Buxton and Katherine Staples. So, now without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our first presenter, Dr. Charlotte Buxton, so she can properly introduce herself and begin. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much. Hello, my name's Charlotte, and I'm one of the editors at Oxford Dictionaries. I'm going to start off this presentation and I'll be showing you through some of the content on our English site. So in a minute, I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll show you through the entries. I'm going to be talking about the content within the actual dictionary entries and the thesaurus content, and then Katherine later on will be taking you through some of the other content we have on the website. Right, so this is the Oxford Dictionaries homepage, and we're going to be looking at the English content today. And before I start showing you the entries, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we put our dictionaries together here at Oxford Dictionaries. And the most important thing is that all of our content is based on evidence and research into English and how it is used in the real world. Um, and we use a number of tools to help us do this. And one of the most important are our corpora. And these are huge databases of real world English that we're able to search. And we use those to track how the language is changing, to look for new words and new senses, to see patterns and shifts, to check for frequency of different words, and to get our example sentences as well. They're all drawn from real world sources. So that's one of our most important tools, the use of our corpora. We've got other tools that we use. We have a reading program where people across the world read publications, novels, newspapers for us, and highlight particular words that we think that they think would be new or interesting. And we're very lucky here at Oxford. We work alongside the editors of the Oxford English Dictionary, the OED, and we can draw on their editorial experience as well. And I just wanted to say here that there's often confusion between the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, and the rest of Oxford Dictionaries. So the content that we'll be looking at today that's on this site is our current English content. And that is different from the OED content, which is a historical dictionary. So we share a lot of resources, we share a lot of research, but the two dictionaries are separate. The OED focuses on the historical development of the language. So they'll look at how a word has changed over time. The first sense that will be shown in an OED entry will be the earliest. Whereas here we are looking at English as it is used today. And we will try to put the most important current sense first, and look at how the language is actually in use right now. We obviously do look at the history of the word, but the really important thing is the currency of it. Right, so I'm going to show you how the dictionary works. First thing is that it's actually two dictionaries really in our English content. Here you can see that we've got English UK, and from this drop down you can move between all of the different data sets and dictionaries that we have on the site. So we have a British English dictionary, which is based on the Oxford Dictionary of English. And this covers both British English and World English. So English is spoken in different regions across the world. So it could be Australia, it could be Ireland, New Zealand, Africa, all the areas that English is spoken other than Britain and the US. And then we also have a US English dictionary, which is based on the New Oxford American Dictionary. And so you can choose which one you want to search, want to use, depending on where you are, what version of the language you're interested in. So the differences between dictionaries, they are very similar in their scope and their structure, in their word count and so on, but it's obviously a different dialect that's used within those. So one of the most obvious things with American and British content is a spelling difference. So if you look up something like favour that has a different spelling in British and US English. You'll see we're in the British English Dictionary, and this shows the OUR spelling as the main head word here. And then it gives the US spelling with OR as a variant spelling. So we'll always give the main, most common spelling of a head word at the top, and then alternatives, whether they're regional alternatives or just alternative variant spellings, will follow. And if we toggle here, we can move to the US English Dictionary and search, and that will take us to the US entry for favour. And as you can see, it's got the US spelling first, and then the British spelling is given as a variant there. So that's one way to toggle between the dictionaries. If you move down to the bottom of an entry, all entries also have a way of toggling between the entries at the bottom here. So you can skip, if you're in one entry, you can skip back to the other dictionary just by clicking that link at the bottom there. So that's taken me back to the British English Dictionary. Of course, spelling isn't the only difference that there is between British and US English. There are also words that have different senses and meanings between the two dialects. So if we look at something like pavement, you can see that this is the British English entry, and the first sense that we have here is the one that is probably most familiar to British English speakers, which is a raised, paved or asphalted path for pedestrians at the side of the road. That would probably be the first thing that most British English speakers would think of for pavement. And then underneath it gives you the North American equivalent term, which is sidewalk. And this is a live link so that you can click through to the entry for sidewalk. So you can see that that's the equivalent in American English. If we go back to pavement, then we can toggle over to the American version. And this is the US version. And the first sense that we're given here is any paved surface area or surface, because that's the one that would be most familiar to US English speakers. And then lower down here, we have the British definition, a sidewalk. So the entries themselves can be quite differently structured depending on the word. Sometimes they are identical, but each is tailored to the dialect that you're searching in. So we have all kinds of sizes, types of entry. One of a fairly new one that has been added reasonably recently, boif. So this is an informal term for a boyfriend. And as you can see, this is a quite simple, small entry. It's just one sentence. So it just has quite basic information there. Then we have entries up to the size of something like set, which is often cited as one of the largest entries in English, the word that has the most different senses. So if we go through to set, you'll see that here at the top, you have some links to the homographs, because set is divided up into 3 separate entries. And a homograph is a word that's spelt the same as another word, but that has a distinct meaning. So here it shows that there's 3 main definitions of set in English, and you can hover over these and it will show you the first definition from each of those. So you can look there and then click on these and find the sense of set that you wanted to find. So now we'll start looking at the structure of an entry itself. So we have the head word up here, and then set is the very common word. So it gets a link here to the top 1,000 most frequently used words. So any word that falls into that top 1,000 category has this link. And if you click through there, it will take you to the full list. And all of these are obviously live links, so you can go straight to the entry here. And this is again based on our corpora and based on the frequencies that we find there. So these are the 1,000 words that we have identified as being most commonly used. So that's quite a useful list to click through there. So I'll just skip back to the entry. We give the part of speech after the head word. If there's multiple parts of speech, then you'll scroll through These are all the verb senses. As you can see, there's a lot. And then we'll come down to the phrases and phrasal verbs. We'll get to the verb eventually. It's very big, scrolling all the way down. And then we have the next set. So we'll just go back up to the top here. If it's an irregular verb, then we'll give the verb inflections. So here you can see the verb inflections of set, setting, and then the past and past participle set. Similarly, if there's an irregular plural, that will be given up here as well. Our data is very rich. It's something that we're very proud of. We put a lot of extra information rather than just definitions, which is again all based on information that we see of usage. So if there are particular patterns, particular grammatical features, or the usual ways in which these words are used, then we'll give that information here. So for this first sense, we have the information that the verb is used with an object, and it's also usually seen with an adverbial for this first sense here. And then the sense below it here, this is a typical form that the word is found in. So for this sense, it's in the form of be set, something was set. And that's how we would typically see that used. So that's some extra information about the kind of typical ways in which the words are used. The way that we organize the entries, we divide it up into senses. So each of these numbers denotes a different sense, so a different particular area of meaning for the word. And we have core and subsenses. So this first one, with just the number one on its own, is the core sense. And that's like a main sense, an umbrella sense that then has multiple senses nested underneath it. And the ones underneath it are known as subsenses. And they are words that are related to the core sense, but that are slightly different, that cover a slightly different area of meaning. So underneath this core sense of put, lay, or stand something in a specified place or position, we have all of these different subsenses that are all quite specific areas. You can see that they are similar to the main sense, but they cover a distinct meaning there. And then when we have another core sense, it gets a new number. So this one is core sense 2, and it's a shift in meaning. So this one is put or bring into a specified state. So it's moving on from that setting something down meaning. So moving back up here, you can see that we have the definition, which explains the meaning of the word. And then after the definition, inside the inverted commas here in italic, these are examples of use. So as I mentioned earlier, these are drawn from real world English. We don't make these up. People often think we do, but we always take these from actual sources, usually from our corpora. And there's usually one that's always shown, sometimes two. And then you have an option here to look at more example sentences. So you can click on this and it will expand and show you up to 20 additional examples for each sense. So these are all examples for that sense of set. And that can be really useful. Examples are extremely useful at showing you how a word is used. It helps to convey its meaning. It can be very helpful if you're learning English, or very helpful to give you more of a sense of what that word means, to see the typical patterns it's used in, to see the type of language it's used in. So that's a really valuable resource, the extra examples, and they're all there at sense level. They're not just under one head word. We've put them attached to their specific sense. The other drop down here is the synonyms drop down. So all of our dictionary senses are linked to our thesaurus content, and you can see the synonyms by just clicking on that, and you're able to look at them alongside the dictionary definition. If you want to see the synonyms for the whole of the entry set, you can just click on this link here and it will take you to the thesaurus content. So here is the whole entry for the thesaurus for the first homograph of set. Um, we don't give definitions before the synonym sets. We give an example of use, and that shows which sense the synonyms belong to. And then the first synonym is called the core synonym. That's in bold, and that's the synonym that is considered closest in meaning to the original head word. And then we have labels here, which I'm going to tell you some more about, which show that these are informal versions of the word. And then there's a North American informal and a rare word. And if I pop, I'm going to go to a new entry, but back to the dictionary, and I can explain a bit more about how labels work. So we can see here, we use a number of labels. Labels help to explain how a word is used. We have three different kinds of labels. We have subject labels, region labels, and register labels. And this entry, bachelor, contains all of those. So here you see at sense 1.1, it has a zoology label, which is a subject label, which shows that that particular sense of bachelor is in the subject area of zoology. It's a specialist term that's in that particular subject area. We cover a huge number of subject areas. We could have science terms, ballet terms, bell ringing terms. There's all sorts of specialist vocabulary that's covered within our dictionary. If we scroll down, you can see that here there is a Canadian sense of bachelor, which refers to a bachelor apartment. So that's a region label that shows what region, what area of English a particular sense or a word comes from, and tells you that that word is most common within that area and may not be recognized or understood in other parts of the world where English is spoken. And then finally, we have register labels. Here, this is a historical label, which shows that this refers to something that existed in history. It's not necessarily current anymore. But other register labels tell you the kind of tone of a word, how it would be used. So we would have an informal label for the word boif that we looked at earlier would be labeled informal because it's not a word you'd use in informal writing. It's just a casual word that would be used in conversation with your friends. Similarly, we have formal words that are, quite high in tone. We also, it's very important to label sensitive content. So things that are considered vulgar or offensive, so either insults or swear words, we make sure are labeled with those labels so people can see that these words are ones that you have to be cautious with and that you shouldn't be using in public without knowing who your audience are. So that's extremely important as well. Scrolling down through the entry, you can see we have the derivatives section here. Now, derivatives are words that are related to the main head word. So we have bachelorhood here, which is obviously derived from bachelor. It doesn't have its own definition because it lives underneath the main entry for bachelor, but it shows you the part of speech and it has its own pronunciation, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment. And it has some extra example sentences, so you can see how it is used in context. If we scroll down here, you can see that there is the word origin. This is also known as an etymology, which is the history of the word. So this explains when the word was first seen in English and any information that we have on where it came from, whether it's derived from another language, what the root words mean. So you can see here the word bachelor came into English in Middle English and derived originally from Old French. But beyond that, it's of an uncertain origin. And for some entries like this, there is additional etymological information that you can look at, which will give you some more discursive information if you're interested in that. Usually etymologies appear right at the bottom of an entry, but if there is particular word history that relates just to one sense of a word, then you can also get etymological information underneath that particular sense. So in this case, this sense of bachelor has an extra piece of etymological information there. So when that's relevant, that will appear within the entry itself. Right, so I mentioned that I'd talk some more about our pronunciations. We have a whole team who are dedicated to working on pronunciations here at Oxford Dictionaries. All of our headwords will have a written pronunciation and also an audio pronunciation. Depending on which dictionary you're in, there's a different system used for each one. So the British English system uses IPA, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet. And the American dictionary uses a respelling system. So I'll just show you both of those. Next to any pronunciation, there's a question mark. And if you click through on that, it will take you through to a key for the pronunciation. So this is the key for the British and World English Dictionary and shows you how the IPA works. So it shows you the different symbols that are used in the pronunciations and shows you what that sound is. So that's quite useful if you're not particularly familiar with IPA. But then very usefully, if you're not so familiar with this, we also have audio recordings of our words. So if you click on this symbol, you will hear the word spoken. So hopefully this will work. Bachelor. So that's the pronunciation of bachelor in British English. If we go across to the US dictionary, then we can see that the pronunciation is in the respelling system. And again, you can just click through here and it gives you a key to the pronunciations for the US pronunciations. Again, similar to the one for the British English content. And then if you're in the US dictionary, then it will be bachelor, a US pronunciation. Some words have more than one way of being spoken. So if that's the case, then we will give both. So coming through here, you can see that we give two different pronunciations because both of them are valid and both of them are pretty much equally common. Otherwise, we will identify the most common pronunciation and give that one, because obviously lots of words have lots of different ways of being spoken. But in certain cases like this, there are two very common different pronunciations. So we have controversy and controversy. Similarly, there's certain cases where different parts of speech within the same word are said differently. So for this entry, we have the noun, and you'll see that the pronunciation appears here underneath the part of speech rather than underneath the headword, and that shows that it's specific to the noun. So the noun is said record. And then if you scroll down through the verb, you can see there's another pronunciation file and record, and it said record. So that can be extremely useful for people to learn the different ways in which different words and different parts of speech are spoken. We have phrases that appear at the bottom of the entry, so you can browse through those just when you're browsing the main entry. Similarly, they have a definition and an example and additional example sentences, and some will have synonyms as well. If you're looking for a specific phrase, you can also search for it just from the top search bar. So look for something. And it will take you, hopefully, directly to that phrase within the larger entry. So here we have raining cats and dogs, and that's under the entry rain, but you search directly for it and it'll take you straight here. And again, we can see that there's an origin, an etymology there for that particular phrase. If we then, one last entry from me. So the final feature that I wanted to show you was down here, and it has the heading for editors and proofreaders, and that's line break information, which I know is a really useful feature. It shows you where a word should be divided. And in the British English dictionary, it's a line break. If we go across to the US English dictionary, there's a slightly different system, and it's a syllabification. So that shows you the dots of where the syllables are. And that is about all that I'm going to show. If there was anything, I know I had to fly through everything quite rapidly. If there's anything that you'd like to know more about, then please do ask at the end of the session. But I'm going to now hand over to Katherine.
Thank you, Charlotte. That was really, really fascinating. And I've learned a lot there already. So my name's Katherine Staples, and I'm the Regional Training and Implementation Manager at Oxford University Press. And what I'm going to do now is show you some of the additional features of the Oxford Dictionary. So here we are back in the Oxford Dictionary, and we've started to look at some of the words down here, and also talked about some of the synonyms or alternative terms. So I'm going to move and look on at the last few tabs that are included here. So here I'm going to start with the grammar tab, and here we can find an A to Z of grammar, a section on spelling alongside punctuation, usage, and writing help. So let's have a look at what's included in here. So this is where you can find out all those bits about grammar that you never knew before, but you wanted to know now. So we've got our nouns, our verbs, our adjectives, pronouns, articles, tenses and moods, sentences, clauses, speech, part of speech, and then other useful terms. And if you click on any of these, so if we go back up to the top here and look at a proper noun, it gives you a definition of what that is about the proper noun, and you can see what that means, some examples here. And in written English, proper nouns begin with capital letters. So if you're learning English, this grammar tab is going to be something that you want to have a look at. So I'm going to go back up to the top again, and we've looked at the A to Z. So you can see here, we've had a look at some of the grammar things. If we click on this grammar here, it takes us through to the A to Z of grammar. Then we've got word classes or parts of speech, the sentences. So you can see that I've come into a slightly different section here, and it's showing you different things depending on what's included in that that subject area. So the grammar tips is quite a useful one, because if you are learning English, you will know, or you're teaching people to learn English, you will know that there are tricky points with English grammar, and there are things like ending sentences with prepositions. Were you taught that a preposition should never be placed at the end of a sentence? So that things like the dress had not even been paid for, the match was rained off, because you wouldn't say rained off was the match. So there's some examples here so that you can see the sorts of things that are included in sentences that have prepositions. Let's go back again to the grammar section. There's information here about punctuation as well. So again, if you're learning English, you might want to know what the different things like full stops, commas, semicolons, etc. are. It talks about what punctuation and why it's needed, and then talks about the individual different types of punctuation. And there's loads of different links that you can have a look at. So using commas in lists, so you can put, you need to put a comma between the different items in a list as followed. So we're talking about scrambled eggs, bacon, sausages, and French toast. And you mustn't forget that last comma there before you put and. So the final comma in those lists is known as the serial comma. And some people refer to it as the Oxford comma. So that's something, take a look at this sentence here. And then it becomes really, my favorite sandwiches are chicken, bacon, and ham and cheese. And it's not entirely clear without the commas whether the writer is talking about chicken is their favourite, bacon and ham and cheese is another favourite, or is it bacon and ham, or is it ham and cheese? So if you added the commas in, my favourite sandwiches are chicken, bacon, and ham and cheese, then you know that those are the 3 types of sandwiches this particular person likes. Let's go back again and look at this grammar section again. There's plenty of information in here, including usage. So have a look at this. This is quite helpful. If you have a look under here, you can have a look at some of the words that you might not remember to use. So I noticed when Charlotte was demonstrating, this question was here: are you using adverse or averse? And if you click on it, they're related in origin, but they do not have the same meaning. So which of the following is correct? And then you've got the opportunity here to test yourself with that. So we've got adverse means unfavorable, whereas averse is people nearly having a strong dislike or opposition to something. So they're not averse to helping out. So lots of tips that are included here. And the final thing I wanted to show you was this writing help. This is something people don't come across, but actually, if English is somebody's second language, people are learning English or they're learning English as a second language, this writing help can be really helpful. So there's tips for better writing. There's the structure of writing. Then how to lay out various sorts of letters and invitations. And these are downloadable as, so if we click on this here, we've got some examples here. So the sender's address, where to put it, how you finish it. And then you can download in PDF some examples. And I won't do that now, but you can download those as a PDF and see an example of how somebody might lay out a formal letter. And if you're writing for an invitation or a letter of complaint, for some people, this is something that's quite tricky to do. And actually, if they've got an example, they can use the example to help them write what it is that they need to write. And then going back again, we've got letters and invitations, which we've talked about. And underneath this, we've got applying for a job. So if you have a look here, there's lots of information for people who need to write a CV or a job application. And, you know, there are a lot of people were unfortunately made redundant during the COVID pandemic, and they needed to write their CV for the first time in many years. And this section can help you write your CV if you haven't written it for a long time, or if you're trying to put it into a format that's appropriate to applying for a job in the UK or in an English-speaking environment. Then we've got information about writing essays, which is really helpful for students. So we've got planning essay time, writing the draft, final checks, etc., etc. And we also have on here a whole load of information about creative writing. So this is some tips about getting started. So if you know you've got a book inside of you and you want to share it, have a look at this section here and get going on that book. And then finally, we've got some information about writing reviews, so product reviews or fiction reviews. So there's lots of things that are included in here. I haven't got time to cover them all tonight, but please do go away and have a look at them, because I think you'll find something of interest in there. So you can also jump very quickly to the writing help by clicking on this, or the usage or punctuation, etc. The next thing to have a look at is explore, and there are various different things that are included on here. I think the word list is really interesting. You get fascinating word origins. There's a couple of little games that you can have a go at, get answers to your language questions, questions about symbols. So we've got loads of information. Do you know, is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? So if you want to know about it, you can see that information, because it talks about, scientifically speaking, a tomato is definitely a fruit. So now you know. If we go back and have a look under the writing help, so let's have a look. Sorry, we've gone to grammar, not explore. If we have a look under the word lists, you could have a list of phobias, and this shows you a list of phobias. So if somebody who has a phobia to animals has zoophobia. Someone who has a phobia to blood has hemophobia. So lots and lots of different phobias. These can be really helpful if you're the sort of person who likes crosswords. These sorts of questions often come up, and this gives you an example of lists of phobias. We've got weird and wonderful words, and we've got, if words containing Q but not followed by U. So if you like Scrabble, have a look at this. So we've got all the words where Q is not followed by U. So these are quite helpful and would build up your score in Scrabble if you included them. So I talked about word origins. Was the first computer bug a real insect? Why does love come in tennis? Why do we have sleep tight? If we look at that, sleep seems that tight in this expression is the equivalent of the only surviving use of the adverb tightly, meaning soundly, properly, well, or effectively. So now you know. A couple of other things that I wanted to mention to those who are librarians or library staff in the audience. If we scroll down to the bottom of the page here, there's a help section. And included in this help section, if we scroll down here, are various things about setting up your account, help for institutions, and technical help. So I'm just going to scroll down here to point out a couple of things. Down the bottom here, you've talked about how you can sign in through an institution using various different types of authentication. Talks about how you can get hold of your usage statistics. And this is how you can get hold of them. And I just wanted to point out that you can get KBART files for this particular product, and you can also get MARC records. So that's information that's included there for you. And the other thing I wanted to mention to those of you who are librarians or library staff is the Librarian Resource Centre, which is on my other tab here. So this is on the Oxford Academic homepage, and there's two sections that I'd like to take you to. First of all, I'd like to take you to the Learn About Your Resources. And there's two options here. First of all, you can sign up for a webinar if there's any webinars that are of interest to you, and we offer these in a variety of different languages, including English. And secondly, there are some training tools here. These are pre-recorded demonstrations, which you can log into and look at anytime. I say log in, you can just straight away get to them. If you click on the Oxford Dictionaries Premium site here, it shows you a quiz. So that's great for sharing with other people. So if you need a few questions to get you going for the pub quiz, or you want to find out more about the Oxford Dictionary and you want to quiz yourself, you can download that as a Word document. And there's also a user guide, and this takes you directly back to the Oxford Dictionaries, which tells you more about the dictionary. So it goes through some of the things that Charlotte's already told you. And you can go and have a look at those in more detail. Going back again to this Librarian Resource Centre page, the other thing that I want to show you from that main homepage here is the promoting your resources. Again, you need to select the product that you're interested in, so Oxford Dictionaries Premium. And on this page, you can find a variety of digital marketing and promotional materials, from templates to use on a social media to customizable posters, which can be printed and displayed to be shown on a notice board, or you can put them on a digital billboard. There's also digital assets which could be used on your website. So we've got logos and banners here as well. So logos and banners, shelf tags, and we've got customizable posters. We also have a set of social media tools, which includes images and a set of wording that you may wish to use to advertise to your patrons and to your customers that you have access to this particular product. That's all I wanted to say today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand back over to Simone.
Thank you both, Charlotte and Katherine. This was really very interesting. I certainly learned a lot. I didn't know there was so much help available, and good to know about the resources for the pub quiz. So yeah, thanks. And I was just wondering, while we give time for people to send their questions in, if I could ask you, Charlotte, one thing that I think that might be of interest for the audience. I was just wondering about how often the dictionary gets updated.
Yeah, well, we're constantly updating the dictionary. It's what we do all day, every day. Our editors are always researching and updating the content. But it gets published live to the website twice a year. So people get to see those updates twice a year. But yeah, as I said, it's something that's happening all the time. And occasionally when there's something that's really, really important, a really huge change, then that can be pushed to the site as a kind of emergency update. But yeah, generally it's 2 big updates each year where we'll have a whole lot of new words and a whole lot of refreshed entries.
Okay, thank you. Are the twice a year updates on fixed times of the year?
Yes, they tend to be in the kind of autumn and in the spring. So yeah.
Okay. We've got someone asking, is there a source for etymology?
So yeah, we use a lot of sources. We have a whole team of etymologists who work mostly on the Oxford English Dictionary. We have people who that's their specialist work, and they will research word origins using all sorts of resources, looking at the original content, so going into books and documents, right back to Middle English and even Anglo-Saxon to trace word origins back. And we in Oxford Dictionaries, in my current dictionaries, draw hugely on their expertise. I mean, we can all do some etymological research ourselves, but we rely very much on those specialists, as we do for a lot of the aspects of our dictionaries, such as the pronunciations, and so on. So yeah, they have great skills in finding out the histories of the words, and it's a lot of research, a lot of going through, tracing things back to try and do detective work on where words came from.
I wonder, thanks, Charlotte. I wonder if they were also asking if the sources that are used can be seen on the dictionary.
Oh right, not on our current English dictionary. If you look at the Oxford English Dictionary, then you can trace it back. There's more detail there, but in the current English dictionary, it's just the information that I showed you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we do have another question. So it is, thank you very much for your fascinating webinar. Are there US punctuation rules in the dictionary?
Yes, I believe there are US and UK resources. Let me just go back. Yeah, I thought that there was, but it looks like we just have. I think Fowler's is American usage, I believe. And then yeah, I think most of the other resources that we were shown are British English, but I'd have to check. But yeah, Fowler's I think has specifically American punctuation information. So if you drop down to here, then you can have a look at Fowler's specific content.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a hand up, so bear with me a second. So we've got Vladimir Benko with the hand up, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing names, so please forgive me. So Vladimir, enabling your microphone, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I have a question about the search capabilities of your interface. Is it possible to perform searches not on headwords, but also for definitions and examples? For example, I would like to see all headwords that have something like very large in the definition. Is it possible to do that?
No, unfortunately, there's not the capability for the full text search on the website at the moment. It's just on headwords and phrases and derivatives. So you can't search the definition or the example content, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlotte, and thank you for your question, Vladimir. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to Charlotte and Katherine again for such an interesting and informative presentation. I certainly enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did. So thank you everyone for attending, and I just want to wish everyone a good, well, morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are, and goodbye from us for now.